The House Local Government and Municipal Finance Committee will come to order. Madam Clerk, would you please read in the letter from Speaker Tate?
In a letter dated March 7th, 2023 to Mr. Rich Brown, Clerk, Michigan House of Representatives. Dear Mr. Clerk, I am making the following changes to the committees for the 102nd Legislature. Representative Mike Harris will be removed from local government. Representative Brian Begole will be added to local government. Sincerely, Joe Tate, Speaker of the House.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, would you now please call the roll?
Chair Fitzgerald.
Here.
Representatives Burns, Shannon,
Present.
Breen, Rogers.
Here.
Hill.
Here.
Hoskins.
Here.
Pies.
Present.
Zorn. Paquette.
Here.
Bizat.
Present.
Begole.
Here.
Preston.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 10 members. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We need a motion to approve and adopt the minutes from the March 1st meeting. Rep. Rogers moves to adopt the minutes of the House Local Government and Municipal Finance Committee from March 1st, and without objection, those minutes will be adopted. I appreciate everyone's attendance here today. It has been a busy week in Lansing. Overall, I am very appreciative of the effort of this committee to be in attendance for these various presentations that we have had as we begin our work on this committee. And today that really kind of comes to, I think, a great culmination of the interaction between our Treasury Department and local bodies as well. So today we have Jessica Thomas and other members of the Department of Treasury to provide a presentation on that interaction, and I'd like to invite you to come up and begin your presentation when you are ready. And if you wouldn't mind just starting with an introduction of everyone here at the table so that way we know who to direct questions to when we get to that point.
Very good. Yes. My name is Jessica Thomas.
If you hit the red button there in front of you.
You know, come over here so that you can. My name is Jessica Thomas. I'm the director for the Bureau of Local Government and School Services.
My name is David Buick. I am the administrator for the Property Services Division. I also serve as the executive director of the State Tax Commission.
And Larry Steckelberg, I'm the administrator of the Community Services Division.
All right, good morning, and thank you again for providing an opportunity for us to present to you all today. We are very excited about the work that's being done within this state by the department, and excited to be here. So overall, the Bureau of Local Government and School Services, our overarching responsibilities are three things, and I think I'm supposed to, let's do here. The administration and also the enforcement of Michigan laws specific to the taxation of real and personal or tangible personal property. Also the administration and enforcement of the uniform system of accounting and auditing for local governments, coupled with the preservation of the credit of the state through the work that we do in other areas. And in order for us to effectively administer these laws, staff must effectively engage with local units of government on the regular basis. And much of this engagement is centered around ensuring that local governments have the necessary tools and resources to remain compliant with the laws that fall under our Bureau. So throughout the presentation, we will talk a lot about educational and training resources that we make available to local units of government, those that we have developed, and also some of the guidance that we offer on the regular basis. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as it relates to our trusted partner model, which will be addressed later in the presentation. So in more specificity, the core function that we do want to talk about today is the General Property Tax Act. And again, that's the general supervision and administration of property tax laws, the uniform assessment of real and personal property tax, and also providing staff support to the State Tax Commission. Another component of what we are going to talk about today is the fiscal oversight of local units of government. And that entails the collection and review of financial statement audits from local units of government. So I'm going to go ahead and transition over here to Dave Buick, who will provide more information on the General Property Tax Act.
I think I'll move down. Thanks. Mr. Chair and distinguished members of the committee, again, my name is David Buick. I am the Administrator for the Property Services Division, and also serve as the Executive Director of the State Tax Commission. The General Property Tax Act really takes its root from the Constitution. Sections 3 and 5 of Article 9 provide a lot of the framework for what we do and what the General Property Tax Act is there to detail out. So the legislature, Section 3 requires that the legislature provide the uniform general ad valorem taxation of real and tangible personal property not exempt by law for taxes levied, except for taxes levied for school operating purposes. General Property Tax Act is the main vehicle that does that. It also provides for equalization. So the Constitution under Section 3 requires that the legislature provide for a system of equalization. There are 3 levels of equalization. There's the local level, which is the assessor and the board of review. Then at the county level, you have the equalization director and the county commissioners. And at the state level, it's our field staff and the state tax commission that do that equalization. General Property Tax Act also provides for the taxable value cap. This is the inflation rate multiplier, the cap value calculation. Proposal A inserted this into the act. You will be hearing a lot about it this year as people get their assessment notices. Everybody's went up 5% this year. That's the first time that the cap that was put in by Proposal A went into effect. Otherwise, it would have been 7.9% increase. So that's something else that we're involved in as far as the Property Tax Act. We're also very involved in Public Act 222 of 1905, which is the State Board of Assessors and assessment of property of certain public utilities. Basically what that does is has the State Tax Commission do the assessment role for rail car companies, railroads, and telegraph and telephone. Currently, there are over 300 rail car companies, 28 railroads, just over 100 telephone telegraph companies. Those are all assessed by the state. Since you don't know where they're at on tax day, they could be moving all over the state, so it's much easier to have one entity assess them. And then they are charged the state average tax rate, which is this year 53.63 mils. And that state average tax rate is the combination of the average of all commercial, industrial, and utility property ad valorem assessment or millages in the counties. And then finally, I'll go back. Proposal 1 of August 2014 created the eligible, it set the groundwork for the eligible manufacturing personal property exemption. That's something we're very involved in. All personal property located on occupied real property, if that personal property is predominantly used in the industrial processing or direct integrated support. That law exempted that property from ad valorem taxation and put it on a special tax roll, the Essential Services Assessment. So the ESA is a specific tax that is for property that's 1 to 5 years old, 2.4 mils, 6 to 10 years old, 1.25 mils, and more than 10 years old, 0.9 mils. That's quite a huge exemption for the industrial personal property. Right now, 2023 is the first year that all EMPP qualifies. It's been a phased in. There was a 7-year phase in for this. So we've been working with stakeholders to streamline the process and come up with a one-and-done filing option so that taxpayers are not as burdened. They have to file once, and it'll continue on unless they rescind it. Just for numbers, for the tax year 2022, we had 5,941 claimants, just over 10,000 parcels, and we anticipate collecting approximately $134 million in the ESA-specific tax. Next one. The State Tax Commission is it was recreated under the Executive Order 2009-51. It's comprised of 3 members appointed by the governor with advice and consent of the Senate. The commission has general supervision of the administration of property tax laws in Michigan and shall render such assistance and give such advice to assessors as they deem necessary. 2009, the State Tax Commission became responsible for the education and certification of all assessing officers in the state of Michigan. Currently, there's 3 members appointed by the governor. Currently, Chair Peggy Nolde. She's a Master Michigan Assessing Officer and a Certified Assessment Evaluator by the IAAO. And then W. Howard Morris, a CPA. And Mark Davidoff was the 3rd member, but he resigned last week, so we'll be looking to fill that. STC is an administrative body that provides certification, education, assistance, guidance to assessors. While this is important. While the Michigan Tax Tribunal is an administrative hearings body that hears tax-related appeals. We're 2 separately distinct bodies. So, commission provides a lot of advice. The tribunal holds the hearings. The commission does hold some hearings, but we'll get to those. One of the things the commission, our staff provides a lot of support for the commission. Some of the areas we provide support in is the assessment roll audits as required by PA 660 of 2018. PA 660 of 2018 is known as the assessing reform. It provided a lot of changes, added some good things into the assessing world. Really, it's an audit reform. It outlined the new audit of assessing practices in local government units, so our audit is now codified because of PA 660, and we're beginning the first year of that audit this year. It's a 5-year cycle, and that 5-year cycle will audit all local units in the state of Michigan. So we are doing 18 counties this year, and then we'll just continue to roll that. We just completed the audit of minimum assessing requirements, or the AMR. It concluded at the end of last year, and that was the end of its 5-year cycle. We've had staff out training the assessors in all 18 counties that are going to be audited this year. We made sure we sent somebody to. We have one guy that does a lot of that training, goes out to the county, and this is one of those examinations. We give you a copy of the examination before you get to take the examination, and give you all the answers. You just got to make sure you get to work right. So PA 60 also provided a process for local units that are found non-compliant during the audit. There's a series of steps they can go through with the potential of requiring them to use the designated assessor to take over the unit. Also, under PA 660, there was some education requirements for board of review members, which we've got a lot of positive feedback on. We've been out training on that for the last 2 years. This year we trained over 950 people, both in Zoom and 15 in-person classes, 4 Zoom classes. And last year was over 1,900 board of review members that were trained. And there's also a requirement in PA 660 for non-certified staff to be trained. Evaluation of the education, discipline, and certification of assessing officers. Right now we have 404 Michigan certified assessing technicians. Those are normally people that work in the office. They cannot sign a roll. We have 631 Michigan certified assessing officers, 733 Michigan advanced assessing officers, and 159 Michigan master assessing officers. The master is equivalent to the old level 4, if you're familiar with that terminology. We also are involved in the valuation of the DNR owned property subject to payment in lieu of taxes. This year there's 7,864 parcels, over 1 million acres, just over 1 million acres, and the value is going to be around $680 million for that property. The commission will be taking up that role in the near future. Commission also does the property classification appeals. We're the first step in that process. Well, after the board review, the next step in that process. They also conduct and review the state equalization studies and determine final state equalization. And then they have administrative duties related to over 22 public acts within the jurisdiction of the commission. And to get a good list of those, if you'd like to see our SDC annual report, we have an inclusive list included in that. Education and training. As I said earlier, Executive Order 2009-51 recreated the State Tax Commission. They transferred responsibility for certification and education of assessors from the old Board of Assessors. During 2022, we had 8 Michigan Certified Assessing Technician courses, 7 Michigan Certified Assessing Officer courses, 2 full-year Michigan Advanced Assessing Officer courses, 28 self-paced courses, and 1 master course, which is a full-year course. And we try to, the advanced courses are normally held in the Lansing area just simply because we don't have as many, but the MCAT, the entry levels, and the MCAO courses are usually held. We try to hold 1 in the UP, some in the Detroit area. We try to move those around to make them more available to people. Finally, continuing education. That's a big part of the commission, is continuing education. All assessors, all certified personnel required to complete continuing education every year. Assessors can complete their continuation by taking STC courses or approved courses from outside organizations. In 2012, we held 12 assessor classes, 12 STC update courses, 26 board review courses, and 1 transfership of ownership course. Then the last thing we're involved in, and we're working a lot with local units, is our major appeals program, where we become involved in some of these major appeals. We consider a major appeal $5 million or more contested value, or a unique or special policy concern, and we may intervene in those types of tribunal cases. And I'll transition over to Larry Stuckelberg.
Yeah, Larry Steckelberg, Community Services Division. I have one slide here, but there's a lot going on, so don't let that fool you. In the accounting and auditing section, Michigan collects over $2 billion from the state education tax. And I know we see it as 6 mills and we all see it on our property taxes, but that is over $2 billion of revenue that comes to the state of Michigan. The oversight of that, to be sure it's properly collected, to look at the collection rates to make sure that there's nobody missing the forwarding in a timely fashion of those collections, which flow up from the local level through the county to the state, is our responsibility. And then there's a variety of functions behind that because, as you may know, some of the capture authorities around the state lose revenue from various changes at the state level that have denied them certain flows of revenue from state education tax, but they have longstanding obligations. We provide reimbursement to them to cover the shortfalls and conduct a process which begins in May of each year and then is processed through the end of the year so we can make those deposits to local governments. The property tax exemption section, part of the adjacent work with the State Tax Commission is the fact that we now have 11 exemptions that have to be approved at the state level. Some of those you may be familiar with: neighborhood enterprise zone certificates, industrial facilities exemptions, obsolete property rehabilitation act exemptions. Each of those are approved and started at the local level. The zone is created. An application is provided and approved by resolution to the local level. That flows to us for oversight, which we do a lot of work on completeness and to make sure that that entity qualifies for the exemption being applied for. And then that recommendation of approval or denial is placed before the State Tax Commission. Once the State Tax Commission approves it, if they do, a certificate is issued to the tax payer, and then they use that to claim the exemption, whatever the provisions of the exemption are, on the tax rolls. Now, there's 11 of those, and over the course of your tenure here, you'll be touching those, I am sure, or getting inquiries from neighborhood enterprise zone issues, which now have a statewide feature based on action in the last legislature. We have new workforce housing exemptions going into place, which are going to test us on our ability to provide guidance and forms that meet the needs of the customers. So you may hear inquiries about that because that is now a statewide feature. But we also have, through our web site, significant amount of information available on each of those exemptions that can give people background guidance, the statutory references, legal cases, et cetera. And then finally, something that touches everybody's district. We have over 3 million principal residence exemptions in Michigan. The exemption from the 18 mills for non-homestead property is secured through a person owning and occupying the home as their principal residence, thus the principal residence exemption, part of Proposal A. And we conduct, along with local units of government, which conduct their own audits and attempting to verify people are eligible, we conduct an audit across the state using various indicators that you own, occupy the property. The statute includes provision that you can't claim a similar exemption in another state, et cetera. The goal being that people who qualify for the principal residence exemption actually deserve it and are eligible. And then we, through various efforts, either deny it or provide review of it and approve it, but we conduct an audit across the state. Each year we deny approximately 8,000 principal residences exemptions across the state. There is an internal appeal process through Treasury, which moves pretty swiftly these days, and then ultimately an appeal to the tax tribunal and then the courts if necessary. Our goal along that path is we provide a lot of education to assessors. We provide a lot of education to local governments. Our people are one of the primary trainers on principal residence exemption activities, audits, and enforcement, and we provide that guidance out to the public also. And then we also engage with those who are denied to ensure that they understand why we did it, et cetera, so they're not stuck in a lengthy appeals process. Many of them, once they find out what the reason was and understand it, then they begin paying the bill and coming into compliance. So those are really the three primary areas that touch a wide swath of the state, including what many of you will hear is a concern over the years of this or that person who lost a principal residence exemption and may not understand why. We handle those inquiries on a regular basis to provide guidance to the taxpayers.
All right, so now I'm going to dive into the fiscal oversight of local governments. As mentioned, we're responsible for ensuring that communities comply with regulation and standards that are intended to help ensure that short and long-term stability in local units of government. So when I look at the fiscal oversight and what it looks like for the Department of Treasury, we have 4 areas that typically fall into our bandwidth or our wheelhouse. We have the uniform system of accounting and auditing for local units of government. What that looks like are the financial statement audits that all local units of government are required to perform through an independent auditor that will come in and do that assessment. And then we receive in that information and review it. Also, we have the responsibility of monitoring the issuance of debt of local units of government. We talked a little bit earlier on about preserving the credit of the state. So some of the things that we do is we'll monitor the issuance of that debt. We'll take a look at some of the financial conditions for that local unit of government and see if we can expedite the process so that when they go through the bond process, we kind of do that prior approval so that we can kick the tires a little bit and eliminate some of the paperwork that's traditionally associated with the bond process. Also, we provide educational and technical resources and tools for local units of government. You may have heard quite a bit over the pandemic. We found ways to engage with our local units of government in different ways. We recognize that compliance typically comes through education. I don't know too many local units of government that wake up and say, you know what, I don't want to comply with state laws. And so some of the things that we found effective over the past several years is increasing our opportunities to educate, to help move them closer to compliance. So we've hosted webinars, upwards of 11,000 participants over the past year or so. So we've seen a significant increase in the participation of local units of government. We've also looked at improving our website so that things are accessible, easy for them to identify and locate some of these resources. But that's a key component of some of the work that we've been doing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the trusted partner model. Lastly, while not all grants to local units of government fall within the Bureau, we have assisted with administering several of the grant programs over the past several years. Some of those are the Fire Equipment Grant Program. That's a newer one that we'll be implementing very shortly. We also held the first responder training and recruitment grant program. That was probably, 2 years ago now, Larry? Just about 2 years. We also assisted early in the pandemic. There was the My Classroom Heroes grant program. We assisted with administering funds to teachers across the state of Michigan. We also assisted with some of the educational components of ARPA. So that's the federal grants that came through the state. Our area, while we weren't responsible for administering, we did help with the educational components, in part because we have so many relationships with our local units of government, and we also had tools that we've developed to have outreach and engage with them in an effective way. And most recently, many of you are familiar with, is the Protecting Michigan Pension Grant Program. That one is still, it's in process. We just did the rollout, and we're getting really excited about rolling that out and receiving some feedback on that early on. So as we talk about in specificity some of the work for the different areas, we have our audit section. I mentioned earlier the uniform chart of accounts. So all local units of government, we have to have a standard, right? We can't assess fiscal health, right? We can't assess their current financial position if we don't have a uniform standard. And so our areas are responsible for not only establishing the uniform chart of accounts, but also ensuring that local units of government are in compliance with it. What that looks like, we also not only receive in those financial statements to ensure that they are in compliance with the state standards, but we also make sure that they're in compliance with national standards. So we review all of the local units of government audit, the 1,800 local units in our state, roughly. We review all of those audit reports and ensure they are in compliance. And I know one of the questions that we do receive quite frequently are, what are some of the most common errors that we see? And it's a great question. And the reason why that's a great question is we are seeing some trends. One of the most common errors that we see right now are untimely submissions. And as we started to do some digging and look at the data, a lot of it is falling with our small and rural communities. And so as we started to look at that, kick the tires, try to better understand, what was going on, and we looked at those untimely submissions is roughly, 10%. So I want to put this in perspective. 90% are typically on time, right? That other 10% that I'm talking about, small rural communities, a lot of it is predicated on the fact that we have less finance professionals in our state. And when you are looking for a CPA firm in the UP or in other areas, they don't have as many. So what happens is that, when they lose a CPA firm, that CPA firm may have 4 or 5 clients, and then we find these clusters sometimes when a CPA firm or someone retires and they're a single principal shop, at which they had all these clients. And some of the small rural local units of government are unable to identify some support. So sometimes what we do, we find ourselves assisting and offering up some technical assistance to identify resources for those small and rural local communities that may have untimely submissions just due to the market and what we're seeing. And there's a lot of data out here right now, even as it relates to MICPA. I think they mentioned that, they've lost, 8% CPAs is down within our state. And the CPAs are primarily the ones that are responsible for ensuring that they are compliant, but also assisting them in getting that information to the state. The other area that I mentioned before, and this is the municipal finance section. So I talked a little bit about preserving the credit of the state. So this is the group that actually monitors that fiscal compliance and those conditions. And their goal is primarily to provide a cursory review, right, of the local unit of government's financial conditions. And some of the things that fall into that is authorizing the issuance of certain debt and securities, coupled with administrative support for the Emergency Loan Board. For those of you that are familiar with it or unfamiliar with the Emergency Loan Board, it was a financing mechanism that was established to support local units of government that may be experiencing fiscal stress, and they needed short-term cash. And so our area also supports that board. Coupled with our deficit elimination plans, So, we still have communities that sometimes struggle. And so our area is responsible for reviewing those deficit elimination plans. And what that is exactly how it sounds. If a community runs into a situation where they have a general fund deficit, they're required to create a plan to demonstrate how they are going to get out of that deficit. And so it's the responsibility of the Bureau to review those deficit elimination plans to make sure that they are reasonable and also as it relates to their creditworthiness. Lastly, one of the other areas here is under Public Act 109 through 113, the Bureau is also responsible for examining the fiscal health of Michigan school districts. One may ask, okay, well, what part goes with Treasury? Is this MDE? Why is schools? Schools is primarily predicated on the financial position, not academic outcomes. And so our area annually will go through a process of looking at all 890 plus school districts. This is the traditional school districts, charter schools, also the county school districts or ISDs. And we review that fiscal health and we just kick the tires to see what are the trends. Are they trending up, trending down? What are areas of concern? When we do identify areas of concern, our area will work with the local unit, the school district, and provide technical support. Because sometimes in the same way that we see it on the municipal side, sometimes that potential fiscal stress isn't always something that they have control over at the local level. So we identify ways to strategize with the local unit of government and the school district to identify technical support that Treasury may be able to provide to help them facilitate some of these complex issues that local governments are faced with. And as mentioned, so through all of this work that we've been talking about here, I've talked quite a bit about trusted partner, and I want to dive into what that means. So the department has pretty much established the trusted partner model, one, to provide an opportunity for us to work directly with communities, but also gain the trust of local units of government by going back and providing them with the resources that they need. That may look like educating them. When you have a high turnover in different positions within local units of government, sometimes they're not adequately trained. And so we may provide assistance to help them get trained by going to some of the associations or whatnot, working in that capacity to help improve their ability to remain compliant. So when we look at big picture, some of the local government statistics, I thought it would be good to at least provide just a brief overview of what we are seeing, some of the trends. And I have some of these listed out on some of the work that we've done in this area. But when we look at things in the highlights, big picture, there's a lot of talk about property taxes, but generally I would say in the last year or so, we are seeing some recovery for property taxes since the Great Recession. Are we all the way there yet? Probably not, but we are seeing some growth opportunities there. The other piece, we talked a little bit about administering the grant pension or the pension grant program. We have unfunded liabilities for local pension and OPEB systems overall have declined about $2.3 billion, right? So we are seeing some positive movement, I would say, as it relates to that. But despite the fact that we have some of these highlights and some of these great stats that we are seeing as it relates to local units of government, we do see some challenges, right? Many of it is predicated upon the record investments that local units of government have been, awarded over the past several years. And what happens is that sometimes it papers over some of the other concerns that we see in local units of government. The other area that we're monitoring closely through a lot of the programs that we do within the department, we pay close attention to large disruptions to property tax bases. The reason why that matters to us, the reason why that matters to the state, is that as that property tax values and property taxes decline for a local unit of government, that's the revenue source. So we monitor that. Dave mentioned a bit with the major appeals process, but we are very, we're going to continue to monitor large disruptions to tax bases because sometimes those are also indicators of potential fiscal stress. And I want to talk, three things that, as my team has talked quite a bit about the work that we're doing, and they probably understated the amount of engagement that we have with local units of government. But what I mean when I say trusted partner model, we are looking at proactive intervention strategies, right? We don't want to be reactive. We don't want the local unit of government to come to us when there's a problem that's an emergency. We want to do all that we can to have and or get involved early on. And what that looks like is building those long-term trusted relationships with locals, because if they can see us as one that can provide them with the tools and resources to be successful, it benefits us all. The other, and I keep stating this is my favorite term here, regulatory compliance through education and outreach. The amount of educational opportunities that were provided over the past several years has been amazing. We have hosted training partner programs with many of the associations like MML, MTA, MAC. We've created a web-based portal of relevant training content for communities. We've also established the LGAT, and that was just pretty much a monthly or quarterly touch point with some of our key local units of government and the associations to have conversations around the things that matter to them. Not only that, but I think that as we talk about how we have worked on improving that implementation of statutory and regulatory requirements just to enhance that consistency there. So overarching goals, again, being early, proactive identification, intervention of fiscal emergencies, and also supporting many of the local solutions to address financial concerns. All right, and at this point, we are open to questions that you may have regarding any of the content that's been covered.
Well, thank you all for the presentation today. This is a great deal of information, and I think a great look at your role as well as the interaction with local units across the board. I would like to start just to maybe hit on something in recent memory here. You talk about the proactive management, and one of the things that you brought up was, I'm trying to look through here, the deficit elimination plan and understanding what the intervention point is for that. Is it only when the deficit occurs, or is that more based on a certain point of general fund balance or the like that you intervene at?
Great question. Primarily right now for the deficit elimination plans, that isn't a proactive solution, right? That's very reactive because the local unit of government has now reported to the Department of Treasury through their financial statement audit that they have a general fund deficit. And so if that local unit of government would like to go out and borrow for any reason, then they're required now to provide a plan. So unfortunately, right now, we have very limited tools on the municipal side as it relates to this. And so we typically will rely upon, once we identify the deficit or they report to us that there's a deficit, we begin to find different ways and strategies and, identify solutions to what they can do. And then we kind of work with them to figure out different solutions based upon what they're sharing with us.
Okay. Same idea here with the proactive management. You talked about the large disruption monitoring. That sounds like an event. Some sort of event occurred that created that large disruption. But what about a large disruption over a trend line or a period of time that would say over the course of 25 years, we've seen a disruption that has negatively impacted, the tax basis of an area. What does that look like in terms of, again, the large disruption monitoring versus over a period of time that has that same disruption?
Yeah, that might be good for Dave, maybe on the major appeals and what that looks like.
Yeah, getting involved in the major appeals, and we look at, a couple of them come to mind where they're it's a community that's down and it really didn't meet the threshold for what we consider a major appeal, but we know that the community doesn't have the resources to take the appeal on and do it justice. So we do get involved in those types of things to help out.
Yeah, and what that looks like, when you say what are those trends, that's why we look at those property or taxable value trends, right? Because the taxable values will allow us to better understand the revenue sources for the local unit of government. And so when we look at those big trends or large disruptions, it really is predicated upon the taxable values because of the significance that it has on the local units of government revenue stream.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to recognize Representative Paquette, who is virtual.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. With unfunded liabilities in mind, I know we passed some additional funding for that in the last couple budgets. I think it's called the Protecting My Pension Grant Program. And so, like as you mentioned in your slideshow there a little bit, you alluded to it. Are we seeing any soreness though from the financially responsible municipalities there? And do you have suggestions around this program to make it more fair? And I've got a couple townships that they're a little bit upset by this because they were good stewards. They scraped together funds, they're paying down their debts, and then they're seeing some others that maybe weren't so much. I guess, yeah, do you have suggestions around kind of that program and how to make it better?
Yeah, we do understand that issue. We have heard just in the recent weeks some responses or inquiries regarding that. The legislation that we are working under, though, was really focused on that 60% or less. And so right now our focused efforts are around that, but we do identify and or understand the position of some of our locals that have been responsible at that 60%.
Thank you. Representative Hill.
Thank you. Some of this is brand new to me, even though I was a Marquette City Commissioner, so I really appreciate this update. However, what is not new to me is the long-term erosion of the funding that has come about because of the dark store theory being applied by the tax tribunal. In my district alone, millions of dollars, and I'm sure it's more than $5 million, has been lost by our schools, our ISD, our roads, our fire equipment, our law enforcement. I have a breakdown here just from Marquette Township, $3.5 million, and has been lost between 2009 and 2021. As I understand it, Michigan is the only state that still uses this theory where stores that are in operation can go back and force governments to write them checks for open stores. It is appalling, and it needs to stop. And I don't know what your role in this is. I understand there's also the tax tribunal, which may or may not be your entity, and I would appreciate having that laid out. But the millions of dollars, where my husband was on our library board, the library had to write a $10,000 check to Lowe's and is no longer open on Sundays. So kids can't go to the library and do their homework. A lot of our rural areas, this is where they go to get the internet. Meanwhile, Lowe's got $10,000. Lowe's makes $10,000 in an hour. It's absolutely appalling. It's devastated UP communities, and I'm really eager to learn more about how we can stop this from happening.
I'll have Dave provide some color, for lack of better words, as it relates to the role of the department versus that of the tax tribunal in this situation.
This all comes down to, the decisions that were made by the tribunal years ago. I know they've been through the courts and back and forth through the courts. Assessing theory can be looked at in many different ways. And in this particular instance, there was some very smart attorneys that came up with a way to look at it, and they convinced the tribunal. I think, I'm not sure there's much the commission can do to change this theory and how this operates. I mean, it's probably something that has to be legislated. And I know there's been attempts, there's been multiple bills put forth to try to do that. So,
Thank you for your comments, Representative Hill. Representative Bizat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate your presentation. Great information. I'd like to put something on your radar. Don't mean to jump on you because I know you guys do a great job, but the veterans property tax exemption, you didn't say anything about that. It seems to be a problem locally, and I think I'm hearing more and more that it's an issue statewide with assessors, tax clerks, county clerks. They look at this in different ways, and the law is pretty simple for me anyway. There's the first two exemptions on there's 100% disability qualifies. The other one is 60% disability, but it being paid at 100% disability. Those two I think the 60% is the one that's causing problems, but um, I talked about this in committee yesterday, veterans, and brought it to Major General Rogers' attention. So he plans on touching base with you. So if you hear from him, that's what that's over. But it's an unfunded liability, so I get that issue. Maybe we need to fix that. But are you hearing problems with that? It's a long question. My apology, Mr. Chair, but are you seeing problems with that, or if nothing else, I just want to put it on your radar and get you to maybe look into it if you could.
Yeah, we sincerely appreciate that. The disabled veteran exemption questions are some of the most common that we are receiving. And the State Tax Commission just issued new guidance in February to respond to the most common questions and concerns. That has been a great resource in the past. I mean, other than that, I don't know, David, if there's anything else to provide as it relates to that.
No, I know that the updated FAQs that we issued, the commission issued, has some of the handouts. You were at the meeting I was at down in Howell. Is that correct, Representative?
He's virtual.
Oh, he's virtual.
Oh, he's virtual.
Yeah.
Well, I'm listening for him to respond. But anyways,
We'll go with yes.
okay. Anyway, some of the handouts that we were given at that presentation were very good, so we incorporated that into the FAQs that we do now, the new FAQs that are now available. So.
And that's to the point, right? The reality is that we do receive those questions, and the goal for our team is to be responsive, right? So how do we take the questions that we're receiving, contemplate them, provide guidance that will allow the locals to better understand how to approach it? We recognize that these things come up, and we continue to be nimble when these issues arise.
Am I still on speaker, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
One quick comment. The older veterans, especially, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and they get frustrated and they walk away from it. They don't deal well with computers and the system. So, we're trying to advocate for them and at least bring it to your attention. And maybe it seems like we should all be on the same page with this. They've paid their dues. They've served our country, and we shouldn't be turning them away. And I know you're just as interested in this as I am. So it's not a point of being critical. It's just hopefully we can help them out moving forward. But I appreciate any help you can give us. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I recognize Representative Pies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. Representative Hill covered just about all of what I had to say. I strongly agree with her, and actually, I've been getting email about this subject, and on Monday, I think it was, I got an email from somebody in the UP, and my district is on the east side of Detroit. So somebody up there is concerned actually about Walgreens that's going on in Walmart. Yes, it's going on in one of the cities up in the UP. Since I've got a platform here to speak for a moment, I'll just say that this really hurts cities, municipalities. It hurts the taxpayers because the taxpayers have to pick up the slack for the exact same resources that the business uses. The business uses the fire department. They use the police department. And they're getting a break on this, and oftentimes they'll already have tax breaks, and then this gets on top of it. It's really, it's beyond frustrating, it's angering. I'd like to see something be done about this also. I think that's pretty much what I had to ask, actually. And the tax tribunal. I know it's not part of you, but could you explain just a little bit more about how the commission works with the tribunal and what the tribunal's part is in the whole dark store subject? Thank you.
The commission and the tribunal are separate, distinct bodies. We meet quarterly with members of the tribunal just to deal with issues that may be coming up with the problems they're having with assessors or things that are not happening correctly, so that we can better train our assessors and reach out to the assessors. But the tribunal is basically an appellate body. If you go to your board of review and you don't like the value that the board of review has placed on your house, you can go to the tribunal and state your case there, and they will make a determination, an independent determination of the value of that property. So,
And the tribunal's part in the whole dark store thing, it's my understanding that they're the problem, if you will.
the original case, I believe, was Menards, and that was the original case heard by the tribunal, and the decision was issued by the tribunal. So,
So it's the tribunal that needs to be addressed for these issues then?
for the dark store, I believe yes. I mean, I don't see where the commission can give any guidance that would relieve that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. With regard to your local government statistics at the end of your presentation, you had 130 communities with deficit elimination plans currently. The makeup of those, I'm curious if there is any commonality between those entities, if these are, if we find the majority of these plans are for units of, 50 million or less taxable value, or what commonality points there might be between those entities on those deficit elimination plans?
That is a great question. So 2 points that I think it's important to note. With that number of the 100 plus, we're looking at that for all funds. So local units of government, they have a general fund, which is the one that we all monitor. That's the one that is the unrestricted funding, I would say, for local units of government. So when we talk about the general fund, that list actually reduces down quite a bit to more like 10. Right, so that general fund deficit for unrestricted revenues is roughly around 10. The remaining portion that you're referencing are directly correlated to some of those other funds that you might see. So for instance, if you have a water and sewer fund, or you have different types of funds within a local unit of government where you may see some of that, those deficits. So big picture, when we look at it and break that down, I do see those trends once again with those small and rural communities. When we look at it across the board, I mean, I think in Michigan right now, roughly 56% of our local units of government have a population of less than 2,000. Right, so you can see those trends and why, right? Smaller populations, smaller areas, they just don't have the tax base that you might see in some of the other areas. So again, it goes back to those rural and small communities and those townships and those villages where we are seeing some of those negative trends.
And with regard to that as well, you talk about this trusted partner model, and you talk about building long-term relationships, but how does the staff turnover at some of these bodies or some of these local units of government affect that? Is there some sort of continuity? Is there some sort of, if you will, a welcome wagon that has people aware of the support that is available to them to, again, intervene proactively so that this isn't there's a problem and now we need to discover the relationships that can help us correct that?
That's a great question as well. Similar to what we are seeing not only in the state of Michigan but across the nation, employment, staffing, keeping those staffing levels are pretty difficult. And you have to think about it, municipalities and local units of government is very niche, right? So, most individuals, when we are looking at, let's say, a mass exodus or whatnot, we are starting to see that. Where you're seeing individuals that have been in local unit of government for years, they're leaving the positions of city manager, CFO. And so with that, then for that local, not only are they dealing with operational shortfall, right? Because they still have to close the books every month. They still have to report to state, federal, local, some of the things that Leary and also Dave is talking about, but they still have those operations that they have to meet in those demands. And so when we do see those staffing shortages, it's having a direct impact on everything across the board. And so when we look at the turnover and how Treasury will engage, at times we will actually identify an interim solution for them. We will financially support them through funds that have been appropriated to the department to support that interim solution for CFO services, city managers. Sometimes we even assist with search firms, because we recognize that if there are operational shortfalls, that means that they also will not be able to adhere to all of that regulatory compliance and everything that we've been talking about throughout the presentation. And so when we identify solutions, sometimes that may be the case, where it's a CFO or assistant with a city manager, but there are other times where they have hired someone and found someone on their own, and that individual just might need some guidance to sit with them, help them close out the books for the next 2 months. So we may hire a CPA firm to go in and assist that new person to help them close out the books and do what's needed so that operations are maintained.
Perfect. Thank you. Any final questions? Well, seeing none, I want to thank, if you thought you stumbled into tax policy today, you were in the right place for local government. But I want to thank you for the presentation, especially as it relates to local government, to ensure that we do have not only good, judicious judgments being placed upon our local units, but also those proactive intervention points that I think are only going to help to serve the people of Michigan. So thank you very much for your presentation today and for availing yourselves to our questions. So thank you very much. We need a motion to excuse Representatives Zorn and Breen from today's session. So moved by Rep. Rogers. Rep. Rogers moves to excuse Rep. Zorn and Breen from today's committee meeting. And there being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned. Thank you.